There's an idea from a book called Einstein's Dreams, written by Alan Lightman. And it's a series of dreams. It's a fiction book that is sort of inspired by Albert Einstein. And one of my favorite ideas is the difference between body time and mechanical time. What body time is it's sort of the circadian flow of life. I feel like doing this, I feel like doing that, eating here, sleeping there. Whereas mechanical time is time that's very driven by what time it is. Right now, I know it is 1:24 p.m. I like to do a thought experiment with people to say, when was the last time that you went an entire day without looking at the time? And most people can't remember that. What has the clock done to our psychology?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've thought a lot about. And I really think that, so the clock appears 15th century, 14th century, and it begins diffusing through different European towns. And it's kind of a prestige thing. If you want to be a proper town, you need a clock. And then they attach bells to the clock so they can ring it every hour. And then everything gets tied tightly to the clock. So this really kind of created a new time psychology. I mean, I think there was already a side of psychological push within European societies to regulate themselves. So people were using candle lengths and hourglasses and all this to kind of chop the time up. And you can think of it as an effort to kind of be more productive or use your time in a wise way. This is tied up with religion. Monks were doing it. So I think it's very much changed the natural rhythms of the day that kind of governed humanity over most of our evolutionary history, and began to make us more productive, began to change how we think about the time. Wage labor pops up during the late medieval period. So people begin to equate time and money. So if you think about the Western way of thinking about time, we're always trying to save time or make time or buy time. It's like it's a coinage. And of course, we get paid sometimes by the clock too. So time is literally money, where that hasn't been the case. And time ebbs and flows depending on how entertaining a situation is. And people lose track of time for long periods. And the day length is always changing. So if you're going by sun up and sun down, that's constantly stretching and moving across the year. So yeah, I think these technologies have a big effect on how we think, might change notions of patience.
In what way?
Well, the big thing is, so we know from studies of other animals that we think logarithmically about time. So, it's more or less linear when we're thinking about things that are in the near future, but things in the far future can seem, much further away than they actually are. So, um, when we learn to tell time using a clock, the clock is a linear, like the clock's a line. I mean, they bend it into a circle, but each hour is exactly the same distance apart. So in calendars, you can look at calendars and all the days are the same distance apart. The end of the month doesn't look further away than the beginning. But that doesn't mesh with the kind of natural animal way of doing it. So we're in some sense retraining ourselves to think about time as linear. So the difference between, 29 days from now and 30 days from now, that's just one day. But if we were thinking about that kind of intuitively, that's just basically the same. It's it's 30 some days in the future and mas or menos one day. So it changes how we conceptualize time differences, especially when thinking about the future.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea about how time no longer stretches or contracts. So you would think that as the days get really long in the summer when it's hot, that would biologically be a time where you work less, where maybe the winter, when this is very sort of a Scandinavian idea, in the winter you really kind of come close and you sort of bundle up with your friends and family, but the clock doesn't have those swings, and so it has a way of homogenizing every day.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is a big effect. It makes the annual cycle less important. And it means we don't experience the annual cycle as much as we would have in former times, but before the clock and before we were kind of time obsessed. So one of the things I do in the book is I look at the kind of time obsession, like you were saying, how when was the last time you went a day without looking at the clock? And very few people who you might interview here would have gone a day without looking closely at the clock. Whereas when I was working in the South Pacific with my Fijian research assistants, I had trouble getting them to look at their watches because they just weren't tuned into the clock the way I was constantly obsessed with the clock. And I would actually bought them watches and as an encouragement so we could run a little bit more efficiently. But it took some practice before we got that working.
And if you were to say, like, if you were to argue for the wisdom in that perspective, what would it be?
Well, I mean, I'm totally. I think there's a lot of wisdom in not tuning into the clock. So I kind of kind of wish I could become more like my Fijian friends who can disconnect from the clock. So I think it's a good um, discipline or a good devotional. It would be a good devotional ritual to just shut off all your clocks or something and go a day with no clock time, just to
Yeah,
see how it feels and remember how it feels.
I agree,
So
man. I
I think
think
it's
it'd
good
be
to be able
fun.
to reinst. Yeah.
I think it'd be really fun. It's almost as if it's like the new On the Road, like in the 1960s. People got on the road and or went into the wild and they went across the country to do something crazy like that. Maybe the new one is just to get away from time and the way that it demands productivity from you, the way that it tries to get you to squeeze time out of every single day. When I first asked the question, you said I've thought a lot about that. What drew you to this idea?
Well, so the main thing is I was thinking about the changes in people's psychology in Europe over the last millennium. And I know there's this rise in individualism. There's also a rise in the time people spent working. And also you have this massive diffusion of mechanical clocks that's occurring. And there's a couple things that struck me as the mechanical clock spread rapidly throughout Europe, but it could have easily spread um, to Istanbul and throughout the Islamic world. These societies were well aware of the clock. They were connected to Europe, and it didn't spread there. So there's just something uninteresting about the clock. And eventually Europeans take the clock to Asia, and it just doesn't catch on. But Europeans were obsessed with getting that clock, and so I think it's a marker of a difference in psychology and really the importance of individualism. So if you look at individualism and how fast people walk on the street, there's a strong correlation. So more individualistic societies, if you just stand quietly by and put a stopwatch on people as they walk, 50 meters or something on the sidewalks of New York City or somewhere like that, they're walking faster.
Mm-hmm.
So people in individualistic societies are just, they're more concerned. I got to get there. I got to be on time.
Mm-hmm.